All right, welcome everybody back. We're here for another episode in our 2022 season of Rapid React. We're got some exciting content thanks to our Dalton event this past weekend. We got some fun topics to cover this week for gameplay through our Dalton event, some strategies that worked and didn't work, how alliances work developed in alliance selections, some teams that stood out, and a Columbus preview for next weekend. So before we can begin, I'll get a disclaimer going that we have any views or opinions shared on the show are solely that of the individual contributor and do not reflect the views of PCH Pit, any FRC team, First, Georgia First, or any of their affiliates and sponsors. So the idea of this show is to serve as an FRC talk show that focuses primarily on the Peachtree District. We're going to talk about a variety of topics, so don't be surprised if you see us drop some hot takes. Ultimately, we're hoping to provide some entertaining and engaging discussions. So with that being said, we'll do some hostess introductions. My name is Kellen Hill. I'm a mentor for 1746 Auto in Cumming, Georgia.
My name is Thomas. I am a mentor for 1746 Auto.
I'm Brian Carlson. I'm a mentor for 6829 Ignite Robotics.
Glad to have you all here. We have a couple people out this week due to quick turnaround time and certain MCs that have lost their voice. So we'll see them back on some future episodes. But to jump into some of our content here, we're going to first kick things off with gameplay and qualifications at the Dalton event. Now that we have some actual qualification match and event action underway, it's interesting to see how things played out. Brian, Thomas, what are your thoughts on how gameplay played out just in qualifications? We'll get into elims later.
I think. Go ahead, Brian.
I thought it was really good. It was very clear that it was a first competition for a lot of teams. And I saw a lot of teams at the very first few matches, barely going right. And as the matches went along, they got stronger and stronger as working out the little kinks. And so I was really impressed by where teams ended up at the end of the qualifications.
I think for me, the big thing was I was quite surprised by how well oiled a lot of teams were. There were a lot of teams breaking off the rust. But it was remarkable seeing like 1771, how hot they were out of the gate. 8736, their first event, them going crazy. I also think it was interesting, like a lot of the old guard, quote unquote, old guard teams had issues going on. Like Walton did not really do well for most of their first day. Otto had issues on and off the entire event. Ignite didn't really. And you can speak more to this, Brian, had struggled shooting throughout the event, and it was very interesting to see how that dynamic was working.
And that's where I know we did a little bit of a conversation last week on making some picks. But it was really interesting to see the teams that did show up. We're talking, and we'll make some picks later, but there was some it was really cool to see the teams that don't often get a lot of the spotlight coming in with some real cool robots. But yeah, like you guys said, I think qualifications, you could tell teams. There were certain teams that came in were like, all right, we've had some time at DE, we've got some time on our own practice field, coming in ready for action, and a lot of other teams are learning some lessons the hard way. I know we struggled with consistency throughout qualifications. Something that we're aiming to fix moving forward. But yeah, it's for Dalton being the loaded event of the PCH district schedule. I think it'll be interesting to see how the remaining events wind up panning out and seeing what teams are working on week by week as we get closer to the state championship event, where we're going to see a lot of these same competitors upping their game even further. So you can say, all right, everybody came in at this level, but don't expect them to be there in a few weeks, because I know we're working on things already. But it'll be interesting to see where people make those advancements.
Yeah, with Ignite, we struggled shooting. We are having problems with getting false positives in the limelight, trying to tune that. And once we thought it got tuned, try to get our ranging in again. But one thing I want to shout out is to Christopher, a mentor from 1771. At the end of day one, came over and worked with our students and showed them how to do the limelight tuning more precisely, worrying about the camera settings first before the HSV values. And that next match, we actually on target 10 times, right? Only 4 went in. But that was really helpful for us. Maybe he, wish he did do that a little bit later on, but it was really great for him to do that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to see. I think a lot of teams also learned some issues pretty quickly, and some teams were able to make some adjustments for it. But the bounce out issue, I think some people figured out, all right, our sweet spot's going to be, right here on the field. We'll try to shoot from there as often as possible. So even though we have a swerve with a turret, we can't shoot from anywhere. So we got to shoot from that sweet spot. So it's interesting to see how those trends played out. But I think that's going to be one of the bigger things that teams focus on as they try upping their shooting games in future weeks to iron out some designs to be able to have a more consistent shot from wherever they're shooting from. Any other thoughts on qualifications? I know 1771 I think was in all 4 instances of unicorn matches at the Dalton event. I think we came in within 1 cargo and within 1 low climb of a unicorn match for 1 match, but that ranking game was pretty clearly a thing for. I think the cargo RP was done in about 9 or 10% of matches, and then,
I think the cargo RP was I don't think that was done outside of 1771. I'm pretty sure if not, almost all of them were, because I'm pretty sure
the majority.
Yeah.
So let me get the numbers from the Blue Alliance. We got the cargo bonus RP was 11 out of 122 instances for 9%. And then hangar bonus RP was achieved 22 out of 122 instances for 18%.
Yeah.
So I'd have to check on that. But yeah, all the unicorns were 1771, and then I think there were 1 or 2 instances of cargo outside of 1771, but they were certainly the majority.
Yeah, I think what was crazy is the number of traversal climbs we saw, and there were potential to be more. I know 1771 throughout the entire event was working on theirs. They just never got it quite there. I think they ended up sticking at high bar, but I remember at the beginning of the event when we were talking about, only 2 teams are going to have it, or only 3, and now we were wrong. I think that was a cool thing to notice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a bit of our 2013 strategy for Otto was to just shoot our shot in Auton and then climb the rest of the match. So it's cool when teams make that very intentional decision of we're going all in on this thing and pull it off. So props to those teams that were able to pull off that accomplishment of getting all the way up to the traversal rung at any point or with any amount of consistency. So very cool to see. If there are no other thoughts on quals, any thoughts on how those led into the alliance selection?
I think alliance selection, at least on my end, was really interesting. Going in, there was that big question of who's going to win the 1771 lottery. I know a lot of teams were really, really hoping. Heard a couple when listening to as third bots were being chosen, a couple of teams exclaimed despair as they were chosen before 1771 was the pick. But I think there were definitely some interesting things. I think 1771 picking the mechanisms was really, really interesting on my end. I did not expect them to pick that team. Going in, I just thought the way that cargo is scored in this game, if you're scoring a lot, the other team really isn't because of how limited the balls are. I thought that 1771 would either pick us, who's a lower volume shooter, but we have the climb, or they would just go with 6705, one of the best traversal climbs at the event. That was really, really consistent. And then picking 80, the mechanisms really surprised me. And then the next couple picks were just really interesting to me. I think 6705 came in looking at a strategy of, oh, we don't think we can beat them with cargo. Let's go all in and try and get this double traversal thing, picking 6340. And then 832 picking Walton and just saying, oh, they're the best shooter available. And those were all good decisions, I think. It's just really interesting to see how all that shaked out. Going in, I did not expect us to fall, at least Otto, to fall all the way down to 4. And I was actually quite happy where we landed. Because I knew we were.
I was sad to land on the same side of the bracket as 1771.
It would have been a lot nicer to be in the second or third seed, just for bracket. Yep. I'd much rather lose in finals than lose in semis, especially with how important district points are this year. But I think, and every team had distinct strategies of, okay, at least in the top 4, of how we're going to win. And I think Brian can speak to a little bit about how the Fourth Alliance picks went down, but there very much was a rhyme and reason behind what we were going after.
Yeah. So I was in the same boat as Thomas. I did not expect North Gwinnett to pick mechanisms, mostly not because of, for several reasons, right? One is this is only 11 balls in the field, right? And, 1771 can be happy eating all of those balls up and shooting them as fast as they come out. So I thought that there would be a little bit of a starvation going on there as one reason why I thought they would not go that route. The other one was I know that mechanisms intake stays out, and the G204 rule as being called heavily in week 1, I thought might be a little bit of a risk, and we'll talk about that later on. So I thought, the question, I was like, well, do they go with either 6705 to get the traversal climb because it's points that you can't defend? And I thought I might go more that way. And if they didn't go that way, I leaned towards you guys because you had the and this is something that really wasn't seen out there about till talk about it. So I got video, so it was in the pit, so I can talk about it. At the match, you added on the ability to go from the mid to the high rung, although it wasn't fully working yet, you were working there. And I thought that would be a benefit to North Gwinnett because you offer firepower as I think about the 3rd highest scoring output as far as cargo and the high goal. Very reliable against defenders, so it's harder to defend against you because you can't push you around as much. And with the possibility of going to the high rung, I thought would allow them to sort of defend against the traversal strategy. So that's why once they picked mechanisms, I'm like, all right. And then I expected 6705 to go with a shooter to go after North Gwinnett. When they went double traversal, that sort of like had me like, okay, what's going to happen now? Because there's a lot more interpicking going on than I expected. It moved us up. I expected to have a different pick list down where I thought we would be at. And so when Oscar got on the clock, I knew, it's either going to be 29, Walton doesn't get picked, and then they probably would pick us maybe, or 1746 would be available. And so when they're on the clock, I was running over trying to get, Thomas's attention because I'm like, I think I'm going to be picking you. And it happened. So I was very pleased to be able to partner up with Otto again. It was fun as much fun as it was the last time. So yeah, it went a little differently. I totally understand what North Gwinnett did. A lot of times, a lot of ways, it's like what they did in 2019 at Forsyth when they had a level 3 climb. Instead of picking the best cargo,
it's different there because 50 set and at 2019 Forsyth, 1771 was the team being picked.
Mm-hmm.
I think is a clarification there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same general thing. Do I pick a team?
You pick the 2 triple climbers, nobody else can triple climb, then you're not, so picking the 2 best shooters, nobody's going to outshoot you is what, they went for. And I thought, thanks for the clarification, by the way. I had that pick order wrong. But yeah, I see that, and I can see why you can choose that. I expected some of they zigged when I thought they would zag. So
yeah.
Well, and that's where, to your point on 1771, maybe going with us for high climb, they did poke their head in our pits occasionally through either the end of Friday or early Saturday, just asking, hey, how's that high bar climbing coming? That I think it was our first qual match on Saturday morning that there was obviously the delay, but we didn't get as much time that morning as we were hoping for to get things rolling. But number 2, we got pretty demolished in our first quals match. So we got our battery box mangled. Our shooter motor got hit, so our belt fell off. So we had to fix all of those things before our match or our audition with 1771. We were playing with them. So of course we're struggling to get these things fixed instead of focusing on getting the high bar climb working. And I think that those are some of the things that doomed us a little bit for not being that lottery ticket winner for teaming up with 1771. But obviously it was a fun ride along the way anyway.
Yeah, one of the things I was talking to some of our newer people on the team, being very much rookies, like, well, back in match 1 they did this. I'm like, if you look at every team's first competition, right, look at the last 3 or 4 matches. And so Saturday morning was going to be very critical for everybody because everybody was tweaking things, fixing things, tuning things. And your last 3 or 4 matches is really what it was for your first competition. Yeah, we had some problems too that morning.
It was huge for us too, because the 2 we got to play were number 1. The first one was against the Mechanisms, the team we were going head to head with for getting that pick. And then number 2, the second one, was with 1771, which of course I think our intake wound up breaking and we had to resort to some defense, and it wasn't nearly as good of a match as it should have been. But lots of things to iron out there.
Yeah.
And I think something there on the scouting side is something I told our students is, don't look at individual match performance. Look at how generally teams are growing throughout the event. Is really important. So you want to pick the trend line, because if a team is trending up, you're kind of expecting them to continue trending up. You have to be aware that at some point there is a ceiling. But you want to pick, okay, this team is really growing in. You want to look at, okay, this team started real well, and then other teams kind of started surpassing them. Why is that happening? And then another thing we really we were looking for is, what are teams that can inconsistently do crazy things? That was something that, as we were getting lower and it's like, oh, we're being outgunned, is what are teams that they might not, do the traversal climb. They might have only done it once, but they did it once, so they might be able to do again. Just looking at stuff like that is really important, especially if you're in those lower picks. You almost want to pick we're either going to score 0 points or 100 points, but if we score 100 points, you're doomed. Is just something that's and in which situations do you want to pick the consistent bot or the inconsistent bot, and that's just something that I think that more teams should pay more attention to. And I know Brian kind of wanted to talk about how or what the meeting, our team meetings looked like the night before prior to alliance selection.
Yeah. So as we, we're starting our 5th year, right? But 2020 and 21 weren't the typical years, so still very green. We have a lot of rookies. Actually, our strategy lead is a rookie. And so I'm always a big fan of, if you're doing the same thing you did 3 years ago, you're not learning and changing. I'm always trying to, learn what's going on and try to change and improve as much as we could. And so one of the questions I had for Thomas was, how was your pick night going? I had a little bit of a problem at Dalton with scouting. Our scouting team did a great job. But I don't always trust Wi-Fi. Sorry, not Wi-Fi. I don't trust cellular data. And so we paper scouted, and then we put those into Google Forms to get into Google Sheets to do analysis. And at the lunch break, we got all this stuff entered. Things were busy, and so I was going to take them back to the hotel room to enter them, and I left them in the pit. Couldn't go back in. So I want to point out for those teams that might not have the resources to do a lot of scouting. On Chief Delphi, there is a post called Introducing Scout List 2022, a Scout List Way to Scout, by the mentor handle is Jared DHK. It's a great resource because that's what I felt. That's what I reverted back to since I didn't have the real data. It's basically an OPR spreadsheet that connects into the Blue Alliance and pulls down all the data for that match. And so our strategist that night was a lot more crude than I'd like to be because I didn't have the exact data. So we went through and sort of like figured out, where we're going to fall or rise to. So we knew how many picks we needed to have. But we didn't get into a lot of more detail because of the time it took for us to get there because I didn't have the data. So I had questions on 1746 and, kind of how you went through the process and what your process looks like.
Yes. So for this event, we did for scouting, we do something similar. We had that same issue of like not trusting that Wi-Fi and cellular data is going to be there. So we were fortunate that we have the manpower to do this. But we have like 6 scouts all scouting on paper, and then they hand all those papers to a set of 3 people in front of them that I like to call the pit bosses, who then input in real time all of the paper scouts into a Google Sheet. And then we hold on to the paper just for data validation on the back end in case we need to look at stuff specific. And then going into our strategy meeting, we were fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it. Is like we pretty much knew going in, we are not going to be in the top 8, and most likely, unless something really crazy happens. So we don't really have to plan on 2 picks. We only really have to plan on getting a 3rd pick. Since we expected to be that like the being picked, we weren't going to be an alliance captain. And when we realized that, it was a logical decision of there's only like 2 big scenarios of either we get picked by 1771 or we don't. And then we quickly ran to the conclusion of, well, we don't really have to plan for if we get picked by 1771. Because if we get picked by 1771, we just play standard, pick standard. I knew that they were scouting a lot through my conversations with a couple of their scouting mentors, Luis and Sid. And so we didn't really chase that rabbit hole of what's the plan if we get picked by 1771. And we just ran down of what do we want to do? How do we beat 1771 if they don't pick us? We and like I said, I kind of expected or thought that they should pick us or a climber, but we expected them to chase the 8736 just because the points were heavily favored to our 8736 being the favorite there. And so we looked at what are the weaknesses in that alliance, and this can really tie into our strategy in the eliminations of they couldn't really climb that much with us looking at if just 1771 only having the high bar and mechanisms not being able to climb at all. We should look at teams that can climb and play really, really good defense and that be our way to almost like moneyball an upset because we knew we weren't going to be able to outshoot them just because they were lights out. And so our priority list became, okay, we want teams that are able to intake and outtake balls just so they can pick up. Ball starvation is a thing, and pick up the Red Alliance's balls just so they can't score them. And then we looked at what teams that could climb and could drive really, really fast, and just worked off that list. And worked all night, and this can really to create those lists. And so I think now we're going to go into what happened in the eliminations. I think for the most part, the first couple elims matches went kind of standard. The first seed ended up sweeping the 8 seed. The second alliance did the same. There was a bit of drama going into quarters with the 6th seed and the 5th seed pulling upsets in their first match against the 4th and the 3rd alliances respectively. But in the end, the 4th and 3rd ended up winning. And where a lot of teams and people will be interested in is what happened in semis, where the number one heavily favored alliance ended up facing the number 4th alliance and really got a run for their money. And I think that really speaks to, and Kellen can speak to this, one of the big difference between elims and quals across all years and games is in quals what happens during defense. In quals, teams tend to shy away from defense because there's the aspect of them not wanting teams to think poorly of them, of, oh, they defended me in quals, I'm not going to pick them. And then there's the thought of, the other line of, you don't really have your opponents change every single match and your teammates change every single match. So you can't really game plan how to play defense respectively. And there's not really a point of putting in the effort to doing that because it's the team you play defense against each team on a team by team basis. And so going in against 1771, what we looked at is, yes, they were scoring the most amount of balls, but they pretty much were scoring on that tarp line. And so we went and we told 53-32 of, hey, if on that tarp line, don't let them, hit them, push them off of it, because their scoring output really dropped. And then we also looked at 87-36, and we began to notice when they got defended, it appeared that their driver would get flustered or something would happen, and their quality dropped as well. And so we basically looked as like they have not really been defended. Let's see what happens. And we ended up really should have won, but we didn't. And it was a really fun semis.
Well, and that's where I think for that defensive note, you get a lot of teams in quals that are playing defense are primarily doing it because they've found out that their intent for scoring didn't pan out as intended. So like, all right, defense is our primary strategy. But oftentimes in elims, it's a lot of I think anybody who's doing any quality scouting is saying, all right, this robot's been primarily driven as an offensive robot, but due to their drivetrain or their capabilities of driving, they could very easily swap to defense and play just as high quality. But number two is that they get to do it several matches in a row, and you get a chance to learn from your first match to apply those lessons learned in the next match. And you've had a whole set of qualifications to learn the preferences of the people you're playing defense on. So that always leads to a ramped up quality of defense in eliminations. And due to the nature of this game, I know we had a lot of bumps and bruises through qualification matches. We had some fun. 87-36 had some fun, and I hope their driver had some fun, at least in semifinals. They wound up reverting to, and this is one of the interesting notes. I noticed it as it was happening, but got confirmation from the mechanisms later. I was like, why did you have your intake was up the entire remnant of I think it was the second and the third match that they kept their intake up. And I was like, why did they swap to only defense? And then you saw it in finals that they swapped to having their intake back down again. And talking with one of their mentors after after that happened. I was like, what was going on there? I noticed it, but I just want to get confirmation. And he says, well, we knew your alliance would probably be one of the ones to take advantage of our bumper being down and hitting into it to get some of those, G204, something like that, winds up being the contact in the bumper zone. But we on auto, we noticed that when we saw
they ended up picking up a yellow card against us, doing the same thing in quals.
Yeah.
But so just noticing that is and for teams that are looking for any modifications or have yet to play, please watch some match video, get some ideas on how to avoid keeping your intake out, or at least driving such that you're driving, because this happened to us a couple of times where our intake was out and we lost pneumatics, so we couldn't pressure, so we couldn't bring the intake back in, so it was just dangling out, and we resorted to defense. I had to tell our driver, like, hey, make sure you're playing defense with the back of the robot, so you're not leading with the intake and giving the other team those foul points. So interesting lessons learned along the way. But yeah, cool to see 87-36 resort to defense, especially on us. I'd consider that an honor of sorts, but wouldn't want to have to deal with that ever again. It was pretty suffocating defense they played. Swerves for offense in this game, great. Swerves for defense in this game, even better. So
as far as observation of in quals, I agree. First off, everybody wants to come here to score and win. That's the fun part, right? So you're always going to want to lead with that. And, even in 2020, we did this. It's like once you get sort of closer to alliance selection, you're like, let's show some things that we could do to be effective to help a team in eliminations. And start seeing, I think you saw some more on day 2 where some teams were playing defense. As a matter of fact, in our final match up against 1770, no, actually it was a match at the end of day 2. I think we played 1771. And I told my drive team, like, okay, we know we're going to lose. Can we just stop them from getting the ranking point, right? For the shooting ranking point, play defense, right? And they got the ranking point, right? And what's interesting about that is the defense that we played in the limbs was a different type of defense. And it's very important to distinguish that, because a lot of times when you're playing defense, you'll have 2 offensive robots and 1 defensive robot. And so in our strategy going into semifinals, it was everybody's playing defense. When they rotate into your area, you become the defensive bot. So they can't run away from defense. They're always running into defense. And then we were able to have some impact, right? But in the qualification matches, when we tried playing defense, it's really, really hard against a swerve drive. You really can get them out of a spot, but you can't really do much, trying to pin them off to the side and pushing them away, because they just spin off. And so, I think the defense that we played worked as well as you can in that scenario.
And then something I also want to touch on is a lot of the times people's defense is a lot like a car crash, where you hit them and then you keep pushing the team, back in the classics where you'd see teams get T-boned and all that type of stuff. Whereas this much really against the swerve drives, you hit them, they kind of roll off and then they stop shooting, they move on again. And so you really want to be intentional of you want to hit them, back away, and hit them again. Just so you're constantly forcing them to be moving off their spot. Because if you hit them and start pushing, they can lock their swerve modules, or they can just stick in place, shoot, and then move again. Yeah. And you kind of just want to keep them moving.
Yeah. Another thing in regards to reacting to defense, right? You see a lot of times when somebody plays D against you, you want to push them back. You pushing back is what they want. You're not getting away. You're trying to engage in a I'm not going to let you touch me, right? And so if you're getting pushed on, you want to break away. If you're a West Coast drive and you can't spin like a swerve, you really want to try to disengage and get out of there and not try to engage in more defense. The more you push against them, the more time you're not scoring.
And the more you're going to frustrate the field supervisors by burning holes in the carpet. So sorry for all the field volunteers out there.
Did you see about the notice that went out to the Washington District?
Yeah, no blue nitrile tread anymore.
Yeah,
so
we're going to warn you if there's field damage.
But talking to the field supervisors, I think they noted that, noting any comparisons to 2017, it's a very similar game mechanic in that your teams are often driving against the wall and burning tires until they square up against it, like they were when they were getting gears from their human players, that you'd have the same exact holes burned in the carpet right there.
Yeah.
So they had to change that carpet out pretty consistently. But yeah, interesting challenges for the field, or I guess game designers, for anticipating any of those distinct game mechanics and how those might affect the field. But yeah, some other thoughts on gameplay and eliminations. We had I think it was the number 2 alliance, right, with 6705 and 6340.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really cool to see how those climbing points kind of stabilized their output, and that if they could bank on those, they could get a decent ways that wound up carrying them all the way to finals. And then the third bot, was 80, I'm trying to 8866 was the third bot that also then had a high climb, if I remember correctly. So yeah, they had a awesome output on scoring some climbing points. But yeah, if you could minimize the amount of damage the other alliance had put in on cargo, that got them all the way to finals. So awesome strategy there for those for buying in so heavily on that. It was interesting watching. I think I remember watching finals 2 and knowing that they went back early to do their traversal climbs, which I think they got both of. But then I think the Red Alliance had done the same, but the mechanisms were left just uninhibited for the last 20 seconds or so, just shooting away, which was really cool to see. I was standing right behind 1771, but they're like, all right, let me do the math. I was like, I think you guys are pretty safe on the points margin to be able to safely cover all those climb points. But yeah, it's cool to see the mechanism shooting to the very, very last drop.
I agree. Climb is really important, right? Because you're fighting for resources during teleop. And even though you don't have a traversal climb, any climb is very valuable to any alliance. If you have an every bot kind of climb with a simple thing that flips up, I saw several bots that had that, but wouldn't. It wasn't properly over center of gravity until the bumpers were touched and would not get the climb. So if you have that, make sure you have over center of gravity or add some weight so you're balanced. When we were selecting, one of the things I keyed on was I knew that 1771 has a high climb. They can do traversal. They've been avoiding it because they want to get locked down further before they risk it. And so the mechanism of not being able to climb, is very crucial when we're trying to find the bot that climbs. Even in the second bot, really important because those are points that in essence can't be defended, and all you gotta do is execute. So if you got something that's close, work on that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts on gameplay and eliminations?
One thing I think we should touch on is in semis match 2, 1771 appeared to be late, was told they weren't allowed back on the field, and then all of a sudden was. Georgia First has in the past been very, very strict on show up on time or you don't get to play. That happened to 14-14 at Gainesville in 2019. So I just wanted to know.
We were on the other side of the field in that instance as well, which is.
Yeah. So let me sort of talk about that a little bit. So at Grits, Jan sort of went over, since we had a lot of rookies, some of the rules that teams may not be aware of. And one of them was timeouts, coming back from timeouts. And a lot of districts will do it differently. I like the way that Peachtree does it, which is if the referee sees you moving and they can see you on the way and the timeout goes off, you can still get on the field, right? And so 1771 came out from every in the stand, saw them come out. The timeout go off, the gate go down on the field, and then about 15 seconds later, right? Because they weren't in, nobody saw them. They came out from the pit area and they wanted to get on. And basically, the head referee, I'm not sure if it was the head referee or Jen, but somebody basically said, the timeout was ended. We did not see you. You can't come on. And I don't know they said this, but that's what we can kind of infer since they went away. And so I know Thomas and I were up in the stands, and I was disappointed in that, right? We always want to play and actually, your best versus our best, and let's go out and see what happens. And so what had happened was they had come down the other side on the Blue Alliance side of the runway to load in, and they realized they're on the wrong side. But the referees were on the other side and did not see them. And so when they went around and they got waved off, Kellen had seen them coming down and then talked to the head referee and said, no, they were there, but nobody was over there to see them. We did see them, and they were on time. And
I was lucky enough to have the perspective from our Blue Alliance driver station that I could see essentially where 1771's pit was at and the full field view. That as timeout was ticking down, that you could see 1771 was rolling, and that they did come in blue queue instead of red queue, so they had to then turn and keep going behind the drape. But you could see then the head referees were on the other corner of the field, like, I don't see them. Where are they? But I could see what was happening in that when 1771 pulled up. You could see that they got turned away from the field, and I was happy to be in a situation where I could provide an additional perspective since they were on the opposite side of the field. So I made sure to go up to the head referees, say, hey, they were rolling by the time the timeout was ticking. We want to play against these guys. We do not want to win this way. We knew how heads and shoulders above the competition 1771 was. And I'm winning the event's nice and all, but if you win it that way, it certainly cheapens the feeling. And I was very happy to be in a situation to provide that additional perspective and let the head refs know that they were rolling and they were on their way before the timeout ended. So fortunately, they were let on the field after they got hunted down. You could tell that they were a bit shaken still from that first match. They had fallen off of their climbing rung and smashed, I think, their limelight mount, and were definitely a shadow of themselves that second match, but wound up pulling off a victory by 2 points. So they then pushed it to a third match, which they were then much more prepared for. So it was a bit frustrating on our end that we wound up losing, but I think we made the right call there by trying to push them to get them on the field.
Yeah, and I think coming from past experience in that type of situation, Otto in 2019 beat 1771 because of a questionable, I believe it was G20 that year, the questionable calls on the going inside the frame perimeter. And I was, as a student back then, you don't like winning that way because it almost sort of cheapens the win. Because when you talk about it with your friends, like, oh, we won. They're like, but you shouldn't have, or it's only because that this penalty got called in this way. A lot similar to like the Rams, when the Rams made the Super Bowl. I think it was the year they lost to the Patriots of, oh, we made the Super Bowl, but because there was that really bad blown pass interference call. It just kind of cheapens the experience. And one thing I talk to my students and the students' parents who are there in the stands of, hey, if we win this match without 1771 on the field, celebrate our win, but don't really celebrate their demise, because other people's misfortune does not mean it's our fortune. And I was really happy that we got to play against them all 3 matches. Just because it's up until semis, they had not lost a single match. Both them and the Mechanisms were undefeated going to that series. And once they left that series, they didn't lose again. And so I think it's really cool. Like, even if we had pulled that off, it was we pulled it off on the merit of our own on the merits of us, not on the merits of someone else not being able to play.
Right. So normally all the opinions expressed on the show are not the opinions of the teams, just of the hosts. But officially from Ignite, thank you for doing that. I know that if we were in that situation, we would want that same thing to be called, and we appreciate you did that, because this is about Grace's professionalism and cooperation. And so thank you from Ignite for doing that.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad I was in a position to have the perspective to provide that input, and I like exactly what you're saying. I think it's not to pat myself on the back, but I think it's something, as an alumni of first robotics team up in Illinois, I think it's evidence of a lot of the values this program instills in people, to make the right call, even if it's a tough situation and one you might prosper from if you shouldn't speak up. So happy to have been able to speak up. And congrats 1771 on the win. We'll
get you next time.
Yep.
That, or wouldn't mind playing with you next time.
Gotta share the love, right? I actually joked with one of their mentors the night before when the weather delay was. I'm like, they're trying to save time, so they're just gonna give you a blue banner and you can pick 2 other teams to get 1 too, because you're just so good this year. It's amazing where they started out at. And we knew they'd be good. We knew the Auton worked, but their driving and their ability to execute. It's very interesting where you sort of set that bar and where the game's going to go. It's going to be kind of hard for them to start really increasing output more. They could probably get increased accuracy. So teams will definitely have something to sort of shoot for, to sort of, as time goes on, and what's capable and what can they do to try to get better from where they're at and try to move up their ranking and sort of keep up with the game. I hope we keep up with the game. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the semifinals semifinal one match one was cool evidence that they were beatable if you played it right. But I think it's going to be scary to see what 1771 comes back with. Same with the Mechanisms, because they did what they did without a climber on the robot, and put up a hugely impressive performance.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd almost count on an increased output on cargo from 1771, even though that's hard to imagine, but also a more consistent high bar or traversal climb. And again, same with the Mechanisms. I think these are 2 teams you're going to be looking at later in the season that are going to be very hard to beat. But it's this setting a standard early in the PCH season for teams to set a bar and say, all right, that's the bar, we got to keep up with it. But similar to like Walton in 2019, coming out guns blazing, filling up rockets, I think 1771's almost on another level in relation to that we said. Walton's not just good for PCH; they're good they're good on the world. Mm-hmm. I think 1771's almost kicked that up a notch, because they're playing both rank. Because Walton could not do level 3 climb in 2019 when they were doing as well as they were. So now we've got a team in 1771 that's shooting the lights out with cargo and has a pretty good shot at going after that traversal rung and more consistent hanger RP. So they're a scary team.
I want to correct. Yes, 1771 and the number 1 seed were vulnerable, right? But there's one caveat. If you watch, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure in their Auton, their 6-ball Auton, they missed several in semifinal 1, because if they hit their 6, we figured we had a very, very slim chance of overcoming that. They had to miss some for us to even have a shot to do it. And it wasn't until about 45 seconds in the match where we're like, this could happen because they were just so good. Now, as time goes on, right now they're only a 6-ball time out there, right? But that 6 ball is going to be challenged by getting second seed alliance could have doing 2 multi-balls, and that gap closes, and that's where them going to traversal, they can spend their time going on other areas other than just a shooter area. Although they have another hood design already underway to try to improve their accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be a fun season to watch. It was exciting week 1. It's only gonna get better.
Yeah, and that's again, I think, where Dalton again loaded PCH event of the season. But I think it's gonna sets the scene for awesome season to come for the rest of our district events, as well as what we're gonna see at state champs, because I think we've got some awesome robots that we have yet to see, in addition to the ones that came out this past weekend, who are obviously going to keep iterating and improving throughout the season. So with that said, are there any teams that stood out to you at Dalton that you'd like to kind of call out on their performance?
I would like to really shine a light on 6705. I think they have the coolest high bar in the district. Most teams did the little dual elevator, one grabs, then second hook latches, and another hooks go out and that type of deal. But them having the 148, 118 windmill style, I think that was really cool.
So I have 3. So the first one is 5332 Toaster Tech. They played some really great defense, and they knew how to play defense. They knew how to not try to, when they needed to, play positional defense instead of rubbing the bumper defense. So shout out to them. Secondly, I'd like to shout out to 4026. They started out early having sort of shaky ability to function as far as shooting and stuff. And you could see as they went on, they got stronger and stronger and stronger. I was very impressed with where they got to at the end. I like their improvement. Finally, the Perseverance Award goes to, for me, is the 832 Oscar for 2 reasons. They one time basically died at the beginning of the match, and instead of saying we're done, they figured out that their climber arms can work. They talked to their alliance captains and quals. I think, was it 1771? Was it 1771 in the middle of the match? Pushed them onto the bar so they can climb, and then went on. Right, that's the type of drive team you love to see out there. Mechanically, also another trial and tribulation. They had a small 17-tooth gear go in their drivetrain and break, a steel gear at the end of day 1. They happened to find the one sole one that was in somebody else's pit. They broached it. That thing was very fragile. When they showed it to me, I was like, there is more thickness. There's more length in the tooth and thickness around the hex shaft. But them not breaking and driving such a way to keep that thing going, very impressed with that too.
Gotcha. I'm going to make a couple call outs. One is 6340, the Marist Manatees. They put up an impressive performance. If I've got the numbers pulled up here, they wound up ranking number 4. I think hugely banking on their traversal climb. They're one of those teams that I think's put up some decent efforts in the past, but cool to see them up there in the ranking points and get selected by 6705 early. I think that was very cool to see them pull off the double traversal climb multiple times through the elimination matches and obviously get to finals. Another team I'd like to call out is actually a team they went up against in semifinals, who was actually ranked a little bit lower, or at least a couple seeds lower, winds up being Walton Robotics. I think had any thoughts on them or had any word on the street that they were running a little bit behind, as a lot of teams are later in the season, that the programmers didn't get their hands on the robot until pretty late in the build season. So it was interesting to see where they kind of got for iterating through the event, for trying to smooth some kinks out. but I'm very curious to see where they get to, because I think they have a high ceiling again. Because I think they have a traversal climber on the robot, but I don't think it's currently functioning. But they have a swerve drive, the dual intake. I think they have a high ceiling, but again, I'm curious to see where they get with it throughout their second district event, and then where they get to at state champs. But will be an interesting progression to keep track of. With that said, we're going to do a little bit of chairman's chat on our Dalton event. So we're going to give a huge shout out to Team 7451 Alliance the Avenger Robotics team from Alliance Academy, which is pretty exciting news because they're one of our fellow Forsyth County teams. They pulled that off in a pretty, I don't know if astonishing fashion is one way to put it, that they had a teacher change and the student body was able to keep the momentum going well enough that they had that effort go strong, and cool, very cool to see that continue to be in a emphasis for that team to keep pushing. And huge congrats to the Avenger Robotics team, 7451. I'd also like to give a short shout out to 5900, the hometown team of the Fighting Mongooses, for their EI victory at Dalton. Cool to see a hometown team win, and per the awards announcement, it was awesome to see what efforts y'all had put in. And those teams are in a lucky position in some sense to be able to have a shot at some of those guaranteed qualification spots for Worlds for later in the season. So it'll be interesting to keep track of what those chairmans and EI teams wind up winning throughout the rest of the district events season, and who heads into that competition or comparing, I guess, awards entries for a state championship. So good luck to those teams as we keep going on.
Another huge shout out to Team 8866, who a rookie team out of Alpharetta, Georgia. They ended up winning the Rookie All-Star Award, which gives them guaranteed qualifying into state, and is also one of the guarantee awards that guarantees you a spot at Worlds if you win at the state level. So huge shout out and props to y'all.
Yeah, which is an interesting comment to make there, is that with Georgia being down to 4 district events instead of 5, it's a narrowed pool for those teams competing against and having any more improved shot at one of those Worlds bids. So obviously the important part here is the effect you're having on our culture and the emphasis on STEM, but cool to also have a shot at a World Championships bid as a result. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you out there. With that said, we'll jump into our Columbus preview. Any thoughts on Columbus as we start rolling towards the event later this week?
I think it's going to be a really interesting event. I'm really excited to see what 4188 and 6919 have cooking. I personally have not really seen or heard much of what they're doing, so I think it's going to be very exciting to see them. 6919 before the pandemic was really looking like a team that was world beaters, and it's going to be cool to see how they grow in. And then 4188, they're always just fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what. There's actually a lot of teams from Gwinnett going there. A lot of the high school teams are going down to Columbus. It's their first event. 1261 played really strongly in 2020 with their Everybot. And it looks like from their photos I've seen, they're not doing Everybot. They're going to be more of a shooting bot. So we'll be curious to see how well they do, and hope to see good things down there with their robot. I think it was working a little bit earlier, so hopefully they have the benefit of programming time and drive time, which is always very critical. Let's see who else.
That's where, from looking at my notes, I have my handy registration tracking sheet, but I think it'll be everybody's first event except for 4112, who's still currently registered for 3 events. This is the only PCH team registered for 3 events this season. So we'll see if all 3 of those events stick to their schedule. But they'll be the only team coming into this event with any experience from Dalton. But hopefully the rest of the teams at Dalton have been paying attention to some week 1 and week 2 action to get some tips and notes on how to play the game before learning the hard way. So keep those intakes in your bumper perimeter and build a robust robot, folks. Because this game hits hard.
It'd be interesting to see with 69-19, but there's also several teams all being really close near there to the DE field, and Columbus having a DE field. If anybody's able to sort of, that's how you do 6-ball automaton. If given a week, can we make that happen? Will we see a second 6-ball automaton in Georgia? If you have a swerve, right, you can then drive it. The question is, do you have the shooting ability to do that? But the one thing that was really interesting about 1771 6-ball automaton is take advantage of the 3 cargo rule, where you hold it less than 3 seconds. That shot doesn't have to be made from the human player station. So some teams who thought they had to drive out the human player and shoot now can actually drive back and just carry those balls and have one less shooting cycle. So I'll be interested to see if anybody else can pull that off too.
I think we're at an interesting point that we've got a couple of contenders on that state championship front out of our Dalton event, but it'll be interesting to see who else pops up here at this Columbus event upcoming. Are there any teams on that list that really stand out to you? I know there's a couple, obvious ones that have had some success in the past. Any others that stand out on the list to you as possible contenders?
24-15, you can't really count them out. They go into this season being back-to-back defending state champions. They've won the last 2 state championships that have happened. You can't really ever sleep on them. They somehow always seem to find a way to win. And then another team is 1648, Midtown Robotics. I think they're going to be another team to watch, especially when it comes to their chairman's push.
Yeah, I agree with 1648 G3. I know that Eric Kaufman, a mentor that was from 2974, is now working with them. And so, hopefully, I'm not saying that they're contenders. I'm just encouraged to see what they're going to do. Same with IHOT 1414. I think they can come out and do some interesting things. I'm curious to see what they're going to be doing.
Toss another. I think I'm more intrigued than anything. I don't know how much they'll be in the contenders ring, but it'll be interesting to see what they show up with. Is that Wildcats team for 24-15? I know they did a rebuild, I think, for the 2021 season that wound up having a full swerve and spin dexer. Obviously, working off some notes from some successful designs for the 2020 season. It wasn't the highest performing robot at the event, but certainly showed some ambition, which that's the thing that makes me then the most curious of what they'll wind up popping up with this season. 1414's another one on the list. I forget if one of you two mentioned them or not, but they're kind of one that I'd keep my eye on for building some consistent robots. I think it was Justin Chow recently got in contact with me for getting added to our mentor roundtable Slack for PCH for being involved with 1414. So I think that means some good things for them in their season. But very curious on seeing what their robot looks like. 3635 is another one. I know a lot of people harp on Mechanim drive robots, but they had one of the best driven Mechanim drive robots I've seen in a long time in 2019 for scoring cargo at a high clip. So very curious to see what they're up to and what they come up with for their 2022 entry. Yeah. But any other thoughts on Columbus?
Also, Mechanicals 4509 out of Linear High School. They did well at Gainesville. I see them improving. I talked to the mentors over there in the past, and they're actually integrating the FRC program into the sort of the curriculum more. And so I expect to see some good things coming out of them as that continues to have impact going forward.
I'm seeing some scary things right now. Thomas and Brian, I know you're in the PCH Mentor Roundtable Slack, but it looks like 1414 just posted a photo. I don't know if we'll be able to share it here, but if you check it out, it looks like a ambitious robot. They're shooting for.
No.
So looks like we have another possible contender here in PCH. So keep your ear to the.
That's nice.
Ear to the grapevine here. We'll do some work in here in the background just to see if we can get that worked in here. Just into some show content, but we're getting some permission first before sharing. Well,
yeah.
While we're getting permission, I think something that this happened outside of PCH. But if you could pull it up, Spectrum's Spectrum Robotics out of Texas, their developmental team had a really cool autonomous to try and defend against 118. I think if we could try and pull that up.
Yeah, here, let me pull that up. We've got Anupam working in the background trying to facilitate, but looks like we have a couple of difficulties. I think I can pull it up here and do a screen share, and he can get that worked into the stream for PCH Pit. But yeah, there's some really innovative strategies out there that are really cool to see, and it's always fun when teams kind of look at the game with a curious eye and to say, maybe this could work. But here, let me see if I can't pull this off here for share my screen, and then we'll get this pulled up. All right, if you can see my screen, I got this match from, I think it was Channelview District event down in Texas. So this is Spectrum Robotics for 3847. They have a developmental team that they wound up signing up last year. That just due to the amount of students they have, that they wind up signing up 2 teams. So they actually intentionally built an EveryBot inspired design this year. But you can see them here if you see my mouse hovering. We'll get this maximized here. But they're this blue robot here, and they're actually, I think this is quarterfinals at again the Channelview event. But they're against the 118 Alliance here in red, which I'm sure was an uphill climb whenever you're playing them. But if I'll get this match rolling, Alan Gregory had posted this on Chief Delphi. So watch what this blue robot does here for, I think it's 85-15 unless I have the number wrong, but we'll see what their bumpers look like. But watch what they do during this autonomous mode, and we'll get a little reaction afterwards. They call it the billiard ball autonomous mode. And for those who are only listening instead of watching, what you didn't see in the audio format is that the blue robot on the blue side of the field during autonomous mode intentionally lined up their EveryBot claw, dropped it down, and spit out their blue cargo directly at the one sitting behind 118, who anybody doing a 5-ball auton commonly will shoot the one cargo and then pick up the next 2. But 118 was probably surprised to find out that they were picking up the blue cargo that had replaced their red cargo, which is just a hilarious but awesome tactic at the same time for pulling that off at an event and coming up with that strategy. So huge kudos to that Spectrum team on pulling that off. Thomas, Brian, any thoughts on that one?
I think it's really cool. It's always fun to see interesting strategies that teams will think up of just to the little niche things. I thought I had a chuckle when I watched it.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny. Yeah, I had heard talk about some some human players trying to throwing balls not at the goal, but to the opposing alliance's balls around the field, especially if you have, a 6-ball auton, let's say. But having your robot do it's even more fun because they're going to score yours too.
Add this to the list of things that the robots are better at than humans. All right, I think we have. I'll try to now that we got our somewhat of a content sharing method out here. I'll try to screen share a couple other things, neat videos from Dalton event, and a couple of unique climbs that wound up happening. So we've got. I think we mentioned it earlier for the 1771 helping Oscar climb when their drivetrain gave out. So Oscar was, I think, on the opposing side of the field when this happened. That 1771 then they then communicate with 1771 saying, "Hey, our drivetrain's broken, but our mid-bar climber is still very functional. So if he can push us into the climb zone, we can still climb." So here, let me work on getting that shared, and then we have another one. This is a funny story from one of our matches that we were able to actually pull off. Here, let me see. I've got that one queued up, but a funny match where we found out our one of our teammates' drivetrains didn't work, and a funny solution to how we could still make use of them in our match for a good 4 points. But so here, let me get this shared for a second for the 1771 climb, and then we'll jump straight into then our climb with, I think, 6887. So. All right, so here we are at the Dalton event. This is match 46 for those interested in checking out the match. But we're partway through. I think we're 122 seconds left in the match. But you can see this Oscar robot. I'll zoom back a little bit, and we can see exactly where Oscar's drivetrain gives out. But our video is a little jumpy. But you can see Oscar is struggling a little bit with their drivetrain, but it looks like one side of it's out pretty clearly, that they're spinning around one side of it. So they spin around and stop right there. And I'm pretty sure this is where the communication is. If you can see, this is, I think, Banks back here talking actively with Chris, who's the mentor or drive coach from 1771. But Oscar is now fully stagnant. I think they might do another 90-degree turn here to get lined up a little bit. But yep, so there you can see them coordinating back here a little bit. But here comes 1771. I think they're about to come into action. So yep, here's the push. Back to the blue hanger zone we go. We'll show you the way. So all right, so they're like, no, we're not doing a low bar climb. Push us further in. We can do better than that. So Oscar puts their hooks up. The 1771 smoothly comes around the backside, nudges him in. Oscar gets up for the mid-bar hot climb. You can see the crowd going crazy down here. So it's cool effort there. It looks like Oscar even, I forget if they pull off a higher. Looks like they may have missed on the high bar climber there, but I think they wind up settling for the mid-bar climb for this match. But maybe I'm wrong. But they at least got their hooks up there for a high bar. I can't remember the. Oh yeah, they do get it. How about that? Even cooler than for making. They get 10 points out of a bad situation, so that makes our 4 little less impressive, but still a funny situation. So yeah, that was match 46. It looks like, but let me pull up then our other entertaining match here. We'll see what we have, and this is match 41 again from Dalton event. But as a lead into this match coverage, we had only in, I think, Q did we realize that 6887's drivetrain wasn't working properly. And I think before we got the robots out there, I think we had discussed Techno Titans, who are on the other side here. We're going to be the ones to nudge them over. But by the time we got robots on the field, we're like, all right, we're sandwiched in between them and the goal, so we may as well be the ones to do it. But what you see on 6887's robot is one of the passive climbers from the Everybot. But the low bar climb is passive. I guess we could technically have mid bar climbed him if we'd spun him around 180 and pushed him in that way. But they essentially said their drivetrain was dead. We figured it would be easier to push them in without any power going to the drivetrain. So we had them unplug the drive motors just so there was no brake mode or anything slowing them down, just because we don't have very heavy robot either, but just wanted to make sure there was no traction issues. So they unplugged their drive motors for this match. But only after we put the robot on the field and we were about to start Auton did I remember that we shoot one ball and then back up in Auton. So we were actually going to have a decent chance of having these guys on the bar at the end of Auton. But with that being said, I'm going to let the video play and we'll see what happens. So we'll see. Kyle's getting the match queued up. There's the beginning of Auton. We shoot our ball and then start driving backwards, and they're aimed right at the low bar. We actually got one of their passive hooks on during Auton. So we have 3, 2, 1. And then at the beginning of Teleop, we just come back and do a couple of nudges and pop that second hook on and get our 4 points out of that low bar climb. So again, cool to see the crowd enjoying that little curious strategy that developed through some improvisation and a tough situation. But cool to see teammates come together on some fun strategies.
Unfortunately, guys, I think the mentor who posted that photo has gone to bed. So the permission to post 1414 photo will have to wait till a later date, or you can just watch it at Columbus.
Now, how are we going to do that to people, Thomas? You know, we don't like to leave the crowd hanging.
Listen, I have reached out in every way I know how. I can't help it if the man's gone to sleep.
I can say this: if you're a mentor and not on the PCH Mentor Slack, join or reach out to Kellen. Right?
Yeah, get access to exclusive content on PCH Mentor Roundtable.
You can see 1414's robot early as a mentor if you are in the PCH Mentor Roundtable.
So if you're going to Columbus, you want a competitive advantage, you can see their bot now.
At the PCH Mentor Roundtable.
All right. Well, with that being said, I think we are out of content for the night. I'm sure we're going to have some more fun and interesting things to talk about next weekend after the Columbus event. We'll be back then. But Brian, Thomas, any last thoughts on our show as we wrap up?
Too many teams are going Swerve, bro. I hoped it wouldn't happen, but Swerve is now the first meta.
Swerve's there, but the Swerve that is there is working well, right? There may be a few teams that struggle a little bit, but it wasn't like the Ritz. People are actually getting the Swerve working, which is good because it means they're programming better, right? And programming better is going to be where a lot of competitions are won at is, can you do these multiple autons? Can you tune your shooters? I look forward to seeing that sort of fall over into the rest of the robots.
Yeah, I'm personally just hoping that none of them play defense on us ever again this season. So that's my only hope. But yeah, with that being said, that's all we have for this episode of Peach Pit, and we hope to see you next time.
Brief shout out to the producer behind the scenes, Anupam, once again. He's not on camera this time, but he has been helping us out throughout the podcast. So thank you, Anupam.
Yeah, thank you, Anupam, making the magic happen.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, see you all next time.